Welcome to Great Talking Entertainment. I'm your host, KJ, and this is the YouTube channel where I review movies and TV shows from all your favorite superheroes, including Marvel Comics, DC Comics, and much more. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Great Talking Entertainment official channel. Now let's go, baby. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, everyone. My name is KJ, and today's video is my spoiler review for the new series by FX, Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn, Bessette, Episode 6 spoiler review. If you have not seen this show, please pause this. But before you go, could you hit the thumbs up button, aka the like button, watch it, come back, and let me know what you think in the comments below of Episode 6 of Love Story. Because I would love to hear your opinions when you think about it. Was it accurate to it? Was it not? Let me know in the comments below. I want to know. So again, this is a spoiler review. Y'all been warned. Now, let's get into it. This episode starts off with Mrs. Kennedy, the grandmother of John F. Kennedy Jr., is having a conversation with Carolyn, Bessette. At first, I thought, okay, this is where Mrs. Kennedy is going to be really mean to her in a rude way. But shockingly, the way they did this scene was they betrayed Mrs. Kennedy, who just really smartened Carolyn up after the world sees the argument between John and Carolyn at the park. And she's just trying to get her prepped up and realize, once the world really knows you guys are officially married, officially together, life's going to get crazy for her. And, you're not going to have that privacy. You're not going to have these moments where you can just go out to any park and have any type of argument, because now everybody's going to criticize every small thing you do. And she's just smart enough for the fame. And in her own way, Mrs. Kennedy does compliment Carolyn, Bessette, but it's kind of like she compared Carolyn to Jackie, and I believe that would be referring to John F. Kennedy Jr.'s mother. This scene right here seems so realistic. That's how I would really imagine the actual Mrs. Kennedy to actually speak to Carolyn, Bessette. That's how I would actually imagine it. Because she just doesn't seem like a woman, whether it's a private conversation or just a public type of conversation you would have around whoever. I think this is the way of her saying, okay, listen, you made a rookie mistake. As somebody who's been in the game for a long time, here's some friendly advice. And I think that's what it was. So that, to me, this scene, honestly, I think they did this scene really good. This scene's more realistic compared to what happens next in this episode. It doesn't seem very realistic in the next scene that I'm about to mention. But this particular here, at first I thought, okay, they're on a roll. They really got this thing going on. Because whether they're famous or not, or in the political game or not, they're human beings. And sometimes the filter that we put around us, or just the way we handle situations, we let loose and say things, especially when it's family, where you're just naturally, subconsciously comfortable saying things more loosely to a family member versus somebody, at your job or in a public schooling or whatever it is, right? But this scene here, this is how I would imagine Mrs. Kennedy actually talking. Now, when we get to the scene with John F. Kennedy Jr. having a conversation with his sister and I believe an uncle maybe, she's obviously really upset about this situation and feels like John F. Kennedy Jr. is being unresponsible about the things because he knows better. He's been in the fame and in the spotlight a lot longer. He should have handled this a lot better, but he wasn't. Like, he just being free balling it out there in public, and that's not good on the look of the Kennedy family. I think what they're trying to say is the Kennedy family doesn't want the world to feel like they're watching some type of reality show of a famous family, right? That's the kind of thing they're portraying. But the problem I had with this thing that I didn't like about this scene was the way they were arguing. It just seems so unrealistic. If that's like your brother or your sister, most siblings in general are more comfortable and naturally just takes the filter off each other's mouths in a way of saying things you wouldn't say normally in front of somebody who's not your family, and that saying things that is like a low blow, or oh, that was cold, why would you bring that up type moment. That's what I would really imagine John F. Kennedy Jr. and his sister Carolyn would have, just because how close they were, and stuff, and they've been around each other their whole lives. So I can't imagine they were this calm and the upset. Like, if I was going to shoot this scene, I would have the two actors and the actress who portrays Carolyn to raise up the voice, crank up the emotion level of anger and upset, and say things that only siblings would say to each other that would hurt their feelings. But you're saying it in a way where that particular sibling would understand your point. Because Carolyn was trying to make a point, right? That's what I would have imagined if this was an actual conversation, that if I was there with the real people, the real actually Kennedy family members, that's what I would imagine. It would be actually more of a realistic thing. But to me, they didn't deliver that realistic feeling to it or vibe to it. This just seems like they might have tried different ways and shot this scene, and this is the best one they got out of all the tries, and I think this is what they just stick with. But to me, I would have had the actors and actresses in that scene to really crank up the volume of their emotions and their voice. A little bit more yelling, a little bit more frustration, more harsh words to each other type thing, because it's brother and sister, siblings. That's what I would have done, to me, in my opinion. But so this wasn't one of this scene to me, I understood the point, the concept, all that, but I just think it was a little bit of dry and dull in this scene. But that's just my opinion. The next scene is John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. They're at their home, right? And they're just planning the wedding, but also just being a couple, having fun, bonding with each other, doing the lovey-dovey stuff. They're dancing in their underwear, they're like they're of pajama type stuff, right? And they're talking about having a low-key wedding outside of the country where nobody knows about, have a small group of people. And, this is where, to the beginning of, we see Carolyn kind of start making more sacrifices, but we don't really see John make a lot of sacrifices, because what they discussed in here, the conversation that we're having, I should say, of what they were discussing with each other was just obviously the wedding And I think when Carolyn was like, hey, you wouldn't be upset not having a traditional Kennedy wedding, and he's like, no, I don't care. And he's like, just, they even almost teased the idea of them just going to the courthouse and getting married, right? Like, so in my mind, I see that John F. Kennedy Jr. did make that sacrifice by saying, okay, we won't do that, because that's something he was probably raised and taught, like, this is the type of wedding you're going to have because your father had it, your mother had it, your such and such had it, such, so forth and so forth. So I say that, and that was really cool of him. And again, I think it's easier for him to make that sacrifice because I think he's like annoyed by his family because of the way they're treating Carolyn at times, just very mean and rude at times. So that was easy, but Carolyn decided to not have her own sister be her bridesmaid, but have John's sister become one, and that's really upsetting, right? It's like the two couple obviously are living in their own world together, and it's nobody else's business what they do in their private life, of course, including their family, and they're showcasing that. But we see that. Now, what I feel about this scene was I like that they're displaying, like, between John and Carolyn. They're both trying to achieve the same thing, but their viewpoints are just a little bit different, but that's just any type of couple. So I like that showcase. But I also like that they're showing, like, Carolyn is actually putting a lot of effort. She's actually stepping out of her comfort zone, outside of her comfort zone, I should say. If you just compare like the first 3 episodes of this series. So she's really taking the chances, and she's obviously nervous about this, but yet does she realize how famous she's going to be? No, not at this moment. But she's trying to win the family approval over, but does that cost the chance of hurting her own family's feelings? And then the answer is like, yes. Also, too, even though John is agreeing that they want to have a private wedding, he's also very easily tempted by his employees at his magazine company called George, as they're still in his ear trying to see, maybe we can use your wedding photos in the magazine. That would boost up the sales. We get our own talk show or whatever. Like, that's what they're trying to get. And there's a part where it's like he's agreeing to it. So he's agreeing to the work, and that's just natural business type stuff because he knows that's a good business move, but he's also agreeing to his future wife that they're going to keep this thing private. And so we're seeing like he's saying one thing but saying a different thing to do different sides, and both sides of the party, which would just be Carolyn versus the business side that he's running, they're both going to be upset at him. That's what it looks like. But I like how they're displaying like John's just somebody getting caught up in the moment type thing. So that's what I like how they showed this scene, is they're just trying to make you understand like John is getting caught up in the moment, but he's fighting the temptation of doing it versus not doing it. And it just really boils down, does he think like if he did it, how long would Carolyn be mad at him? I think that's what he's betting on. But I don't know if they're going to if they actually go through it with the putting the wedding photos in the George magazine. Also in this episode, we see Carolyn quit her job at Calvin Klein, and her boss obviously knew why, and he's not really pleased, but he's keeping it professional, and you can tell he wanted to say, "You're only doing this because of John." But she understands, like, he understands, I should say, the situation of the rise of fame. Like, she's going to become a big star. And then she won't be able to have a normal life and continue doing this. And she made that, and she said, like, she's going to move on to bigger things and do other stuff. And she knew, too, that what she was getting into, she wasn't going to be able to commit, and that wouldn't be fair to the company. So it was very bittersweet, but, again, Carolyn is making a huge sacrifice, and I don't think John realizes how much that's going to affect her life, and he hasn't taken that into consideration. And I think Carolyn's mom realizes that too, because when we get to the scene where everybody comes to the wedding location, they have this dinner. One of his family member, Mrs. Kennedy gives a toast, but then Carolyn's mom gives a toast and says the sweetest thing, like brings up a moment that when Carolyn was a little kid, she sat in front of the school bus because there was a new student there and she didn't want to feel left out, and saying Carolyn is a people pleaser in a way, and that's like her superpower. And she was so worried that John needed to see that, and John and Carolyn's mom, Anne, that's Carolyn's mom's name is Anne. They talked, and she still doubted, even though he promised he would make sure and protect her and all that and hear her considerations. But, the drama continues, And, again, the wedding's about to start. The dress is not right yet, but they're trying. But as soon as the wedding starts, it's like all that drama went away. It started to feel like a sweet and cozy feeling, creating great memories, and it felt like a natural wedding. Everybody's just happy, but you can see a little bit of doubt, like, oh, I can't believe this is happening moment. But all this stuff goes away, and they finally married, and they're celebrating, and that's also, it's foreshadowing, like, the new challenges and problems that begin in the future. And you know what? It felt like the Red Wedding from the Games of Thrones series, but it had that type of vibes, but it didn't have the violence like Games of Thrones, obviously. And then at the end of the episode, they kind of foreshadow the airplane. So that's how this episode ends. Now, 1 out of 10, I got to give it a 5. Really good. Again, the one thing is, like, in the beginning of the episode, some of the dialogue was a little bit dry. The emotions didn't fit correctly. Like, I knew what they were trying to do, but it just wasn't natural. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel right. I feel like they may have done different takes on it, and I think this was the best one that they could get out of it. And then when they edited this episode, they just cut and paste what they could in to make it look decent. But it wasn't like the best episode, but the ending to it, the wedding part, was awesome. They got that on point. It felt romantic. It felt like a love. It felt like two happy couples about to enjoy their life. This was a happy moment. They got that part right. So, other than that, that's my spoiler review. Thank you guys so much. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Great Talk and Entertainment Official Channel. Subscribe, hit that notification button so you always be up to date with all my latest content. Thank you guys, and peace out.